When a traumatized boy hasn't spoken a single word since the night his mother drowned, no one expected the new maid with a hidden musical gift to unlock his silence. Zariah Banks came to the Cole mansion to escape her past, not to uncover a murderous family secret buried beneath wealth and power. As music awakens little Elijah's voice, a dangerous man will stop at nothing to silence the truth, even if it means adding 2 more bodies to his bloody legacy. What really happened that night by the pool, when Elijah watched his grandfather's hands push his mother underwater? Subscribe now and drop a comment, telling me if you'd risk everything to protect a child who witnessed murder, because this twisted family saga is about to show how far a father will go for justice and how deep a killer's rage can burn. The black iron gates of the Cole estate opened slowly as Zariah Banks clutched her small suitcase. At 26, she had already seen enough disappointment to last a lifetime. Atlanta was now behind her, along with the ex-boyfriend who'd cheated, the mother who'd needed constant care, and the dreams of music school she'd abandoned to support everyone but herself. "This is just a job," she whispered, looking up at the massive Connecticut mansion. "Clean their house, keep to yourself, and start over." The employment agency had been clear. The position paid extremely well because discretion was required. The wealthy family valued their privacy above all else. Mr. Peterson, the silver-haired butler who'd met her at the gate, led her through manicured gardens. "There are rules here, Miss Banks," he said without looking back. "The most important is to stay away from the child." "The child?" Zariah asked, struggling to keep up. "Young Master Elijah. He has special needs. Mr. Cole insists that staff have minimal contact with him. You'll be cleaning the East Wing where the boy rarely goes." Zariah nodded, though something about this arrangement felt strange. She'd worked as a nanny before taking care of houses. Children had always been drawn to her. The mansion's interior was cold despite its grandeur. All marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and furniture that looked too perfect to use. Everything spotless yet somehow lifeless. "Your quarters," Mr. Peterson said, showing her to a modest but comfortable room near the kitchen. "Mr. Reginald Cole is away on business. His son, Mr. Grayson Cole, runs the household in his absence. He'll meet you tomorrow." Left alone, Zariah unpacked her few belongings, placing a framed photo of her grandmother on the nightstand. Grandma May had raised her after her parents died, filling their small house with gospel songs and love, until cancer took her too just last year. "I'm trying, Grandma," Zariah whispered to the photo. "I'm trying to start fresh." That night she slept fitfully in the strange house, dreaming of her grandmother's hymns. The next morning Zariah was up early, eager to prove herself. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, showed her the cleaning supplies and the rooms she'd be responsible for. "You'll mainly handle the East Wing," Mrs. Winters explained. "The library, sitting rooms, guest bedrooms. Stay away from the West Wing. That's Mr. Grayson and the boys' private quarters." "What's wrong with the child?" Zariah asked softly. Mrs. Winters' face tightened. "Elijah hasn't spoken a word in 3 years, not since his mother died. Doctors call it selective mutism, triggered by trauma. He's autistic too, so he has difficulties. Mr. Grayson has spent a fortune on specialists, but nothing helps." Before Zariah could ask more, a deep voice interrupted them. "Mrs. Winters, I need the weekly menu changed." Zariah turned to find a tall man with dark hair and tired eyes standing in the doorway. He wore expensive clothes, but his face looked worn, like someone carrying too much weight. "Mr. Cole," Mrs. Winters nodded. "This is Zariah Banks, the new maid." Grayson Cole barely looked at Zariah. "Fine, remember the rules." "Miss Banks, my son requires consistency and privacy." "Yes, sir," Zariah replied, meeting his gaze directly. Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps at her confidence. Then he nodded curtly and left. Mrs. Winters sighed. He wasn't always like that. Before his wife died and the boy stopped talking, Mr. Grayson used to play guitar and laugh. Now he just works and worries. "How did his wife die?" Zariah asked. The housekeeper's eyes darted around nervously. "An accident at the pool. That's all anyone says. Now get to work. The library needs dusting." For the first week, Zariah did her job and kept to herself. She cleaned quietly, efficiently, and stayed away from the West Wing as instructed. But on Friday, while dusting the grand piano in the library, she found herself sitting on the bench. Her fingers hovered over the keys. No one was around and the house felt so silent, so empty, Almost without thinking, she began to play softly, humming a hymn her grandmother had taught her. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Her voice was rich and warm, filling the cold space with something it had been missing. She closed her eyes, letting the familiar melody wash over her. When she opened them, she gasped. A small boy stood in the doorway, watching her with wide eyes. He was thin with dark hair like his father's, wearing pajamas despite it being afternoon. "Hello," Zariah said gently, her hands stilling on the piano. "You must be Elijah." The boy didn't respond but didn't run away either. He just stared at her with an intensity that made her heart ache. "I'm sorry if I disturbed you," she said. "I was just playing a little music." Elijah took one step forward, then another, his eyes fixed on the piano. "Do you like music?" Zariah asked. No response, but he moved closer, until he stood just a few feet away. Zariah smiled and began to play again, this time a simple lullaby her grandmother sang to her as a child. She sang softly, watching as the boy's rigid posture seemed to relax slightly. "It's called Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," she told him between verses. "My grandma used to sing it to me when I was scared." To her amazement, Elijah sat on the floor, cross-legged, watching her hands on the keys. She played for 10 minutes, moving from one gentle song to another, until Mrs. Winter's voice called out, "Elijah, where are you, child?" The boy scrambled to his feet and disappeared through the door just as the housekeeper appeared. "Was he in here?" Mrs. Winters asked, alarmed. "Just for a moment," Zariah admitted. "I was playing the piano. He seemed to like it." Mrs. Winters looked horrified. "You can't do that. Mr. Grayson would be furious. Elijah's routine is strict. He's not supposed to be in this wing at all." "I didn't call him in." "He just appeared," Zariah said. "He seemed peaceful listening to music." "It doesn't matter," Mrs. Winters insisted. "If Mr. Grayson finds out, he'll fire you on the spot. Now finish the library and remember your place." Zariah tried to forget about the encounter, but the image of Elijah's intense gaze stayed with her. There had been something in his eyes, not emptiness, but a trapped kind of longing. Over the next few days, she noticed him more often, lingering in doorways when she cleaned, watching her from a distance. She was careful not to approach him or play music again, but she couldn't help wondering what was locked inside his silent world. On Wednesday, while cleaning the sitting room, she found herself alone again. Without thinking, she began humming while she worked, an old church song her grandmother loved. Halfway through the song, she heard something behind her that made her freeze, a small, shaky hum, trying to match her tune. Zariah turned slowly. Elijah stood in the doorway, and the sound was coming from him. His lips were parted and he was humming, badly off-key, but definitely humming along with her. "Elijah," she whispered. Afraid to break the spell, the boy stopped immediately, looking almost frightened by his own sound. "It's okay," Zariah said quickly. "That was beautiful. Do you want to sing with me?" She began humming again, softer this time. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, Elijah joined in again. Tears filled Zariah's eyes as she continued the melody, letting the small, uncertain voice find its way alongside hers. She knelt down to his level, still humming, and saw something change in his face, like a door cracking open. Neither of them heard the footsteps until it was too late. What the hell is going on here? Grayson Cole stood in the doorway, his face a storm of confusion and anger. Elijah immediately went silent, shrinking back. "Mr. Cole," Zariah began. "Get away from my son," he snapped. "Now." Elijah ran past his father and disappeared down the hallway. Grayson's hands were shaking. "I told you to stay away from him," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You're fired. Pack your things." "Your son was humming," Zariah said firmly. "He was making music with me." Grayson froze. "What did you say?" "Elijah was humming along with me." He's responded to music twice now. The first time he just listened, but today he actually hummed with me. Disbelief and something like desperate hope fought across Grayson's face. "That's impossible. He hasn't made a sound in 3 years." "I know what I heard," Zariah insisted. "Fire me if you want, but first let me show you." 20 minutes later, they sat in the library. Elijah had been coaxed back in by Mrs. Winters, who stood nervously by the door while Grayson watched from an armchair, his body tense. "I can't promise anything," Zariah warned, "but just listen. She began playing the piano softly, singing the same lullaby. Elijah stood stiffly by the bookshelf, his eyes on the floor. Nothing happened. Grayson shifted impatiently, his disappointment visible. "Please, Elijah," Zariah whispered. "It's okay to make music." She changed songs, moving to amazing grace, letting her voice grow a little stronger. On the second verse, she looked directly at Elijah and saw him watching her hands on the keys. When it happened, it was so faint that Grayson almost missed it. A tiny hum, barely audible, matching one note of Zariah's song. Grayson stood up so quickly he knocked over his chair. "Elijah?" The boy went silent again, looking scared. "Don't stop," Zariah told Grayson. "You'll frighten him. Just listen." She continued playing, her eyes on Elijah, encouraging him with a smile. After a long moment, the hum returned, small but unmistakable. When she looked at Grayson, he had tears streaming down his face. Later that night, after Elijah had gone to bed, Grayson called Zariah to his study. The room was dark except for one lamp, and he sat behind a massive desk looking drained. "I apologize for how I reacted," he said stiffly. "I've had so many disappointments with Elijah's treatment that I've become protective." "I understand," Zariah said. "I wasn't trying to interfere. He just found me when I was playing." Grayson ran a hand through his hair. 3 years of specialists. The best doctors in the country. Thousands of hours of therapy. And you got him to make a sound in less than 2 weeks by singing to him? "Music reaches places words can't," Zariah said simply. "My grandmother always said that." "What do you know about autism? About selective mutism?" "Only what I've learned from working with children," Zariah admitted. "But I know about loss. My parents died when I was young, and I lost my grandmother last year. Sometimes when words feel too hard, music says what we can't." Grayson studied her for a long moment. "You were hired as a maid." "Yes, sir. But clearly you have other skills." He took a deep breath. "I want to try something. I'd like you to spend 1 hour each day with Elijah, playing music, singing, whatever you did today. I'll pay you extra, of course." Zariah considered this. "What about your father?" "The agency said Mr. Reginald Cole has strict rules about the staff." Grayson's jaw tightened. "My father returns from Europe next week. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. For now, this stays between us, Mrs. Winters and Peterson. And if Elijah improves, will you tell your father then?" "My father," Grayson hesitated. "He has strong opinions about Elijah's care. He believes the boy should be in a specialized facility, not at home. I fought to keep my son with me, but it's been challenging." Zariah heard the pain behind his carefully chosen words. "I understand. I'll help however I can." 1 hour a day, Grayson repeated. "In the music room on the west wing. Mrs. Winters will bring Elijah to you. But Miss Banks..." "Yes?" His eyes met hers, vulnerable for the first time. "Don't make promises you can't keep. My son has been through enough disappointment. So have you," Zariah said softly. Something passed between them, a moment of recognition, before Grayson looked away. "We'll start tomorrow," he said. For the next 3 days, Zariah spent her mornings cleaning and her afternoons in the music room with Elijah. The first session was slow. The boy would only stand by the door, humming occasionally when she played certain songs. But by the 3rd day, he sat beside her on the piano bench, his small fingers sometimes reaching out to touch a key after she played it. "That's a G note," she told him. "Want to try it?" To her surprise, he pressed the key deliberately, then looked up at her face, searching for approval. "Beautiful," she said, smiling. "That's beautiful, Elijah." What neither of them knew was that Grayson watched every session through a crack in the door, his heart breaking and mending with each small sound his son made. On Friday afternoon, Zariah was teaching Elijah a simple pattern of notes when the music room door swung open fully. Grayson stood there, guitar case in hand. "I thought maybe..." He looked uncertain, almost boyish. "Maybe we could try together. I used to play before..." He didn't finish, but he didn't need to, before his wife died. Before Elijah stopped speaking. Before life became about survival rather than joy. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Zariah said, making room on the piano bench. "Elijah, look who's joining our music time." The boy's eyes widened at the sight of the guitar case. Grayson sat down and opened it, revealing a beautiful acoustic guitar that looked well-loved, but unused for years. He ran his fingers over the strings, checking the tuning. "I'm probably rusty," he said apologetically, "We're just making sounds together," Zariah assured him. "No judgment here." She began playing a simple melody, and after a moment Grayson joined in, his fingers remembering the chords. The music they created filled the room, imperfect but alive, and then the miracle happened again. Between them, Elijah began to hum. Grayson's fingers stumbled on the strings, but he quickly recovered, his eyes locked on his son's face. They played together, piano, guitar, and a small, unsteady voice, creating the first family harmony the mansion had heard in years. When they finished, Grayson set his guitar down and pulled Elijah into a fierce hug. "That was perfect," he whispered. "You're perfect, son." Over Elijah's head, his eyes met Zariah's, filled with gratitude and something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. For that moment, the broken pieces of 3 separate lives seemed to fit together in a new pattern. One built on music instead of silence, hope instead of loss. But as the sun set behind the massive estate, the shadow of Reginald Cole's imminent return loomed. In less than 48 hours he would be home, bringing with him the weight of family secrets that threatened to silence their fragile harmony forever. And Zariah, despite her promise to stop rescuing people who didn't want to be saved, found herself caring too much about the quiet boy and his damaged father to walk away, even as her intuition warned her that there was much more to the story of this house and the tragedy that had struck it 3 years ago. What had really happened to Elijah's mother, and why did everyone in the mansion seem afraid to speak of it? Reginald Cole's arrival sent a chill through the entire mansion. Zariah watched from the kitchen window as 3 black cars pulled up the driveway. Staff members scrambled to position themselves for the welcome. "Remember your place," Mrs. Winters whispered to Zariah. "Mr. Reginald asked a lot of questions. Just say you clean the east wing and nothing more." The man who stepped from the first car moved like someone used to making others wait. Tall and imposing, with silver hair and cold eyes, Reginald Cole barely acknowledged the staff as he strode into his home. Zariah slipped away before he could notice her. Returning to the guest rooms she was supposed to be cleaning. But even at a distance she felt the change in the house, as if the air itself had grown heavier. That afternoon, there was no music session with Elijah. Mrs. Winters came to Zariah while she was making beds. "Mr. Grayson says to skip today," the housekeeper said nervously. "His father wants a full report on everything that's happened in his absence. Does Mr. Reginald know about Elijah's progress?" Zariah asked. Mrs. Winters shook her head. "Mr. Grayson thinks it best to wait. The elder Mr. Cole has strong opinions about the boy's condition." Later, Zariah overheard voices from Reginald's study as she walked past with fresh towels. "Wasting more money on quack therapies," Reginald was saying. "The boy needs structure, Grayson." "The school in Switzerland I showed you, he's my son," Grayson replied, his voice tight. "And he's making progress here." "Progress?" Reginald scoffed. "He hasn't spoken in 3 years. Accept reality." "I know my son," Grayson insisted. "You know nothing," Reginald snapped. "You're as weak now as you were when Catherine was alive. Always letting her make the decisions. Always following instead of leading." There was a crash. Like something being thrown. "Don't speak about my wife," Grayson said, his voice dangerous. "Your wife," Reginald laughed without humor. "The woman who nearly destroyed everything we built. If she hadn't, that's enough." Zariah moved quickly away, her heart racing. There was something disturbing in the way Reginald spoke about Elijah's mother, something that went beyond mere dislike. That night, unable to sleep, Zariah slipped out to the kitchen for tea. The house was dark except for a light in the library. Curious, she peeked in. Grayson sat alone at the piano, not playing, just staring at the keys. A glass of whiskey sat untouched beside him. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly. He looked up, surprised but not angry. "My father has that effect on people." "I heard some of your argument," Zariah admitted. "I'm sorry," Grayson sighed. "My father thinks Elijah would be better off in an institution. Out of sight, out of mind." "That's terrible," Zariah said, entering the room fully. "Elijah belongs with his family." "My thoughts exactly." He gestured to the bench beside him. "Join me?" Zariah hesitated, then sat down. For a moment, neither spoke. "I haven't told him about the music," Grayson finally said. "Or about you. Why not? Surely Elijah's progress would convince him." "You don't know my father," Grayson interrupted. "He doesn't care about progress. He cares about appearances. A grandson who doesn't speak. Who needs special care? That's an embarrassment to him. That's horrible, Zariah whispered. That's Reginald Cole. Grayson's fingers brushed the piano keys without pressing them. My whole life, nothing I did was ever good enough. When I wanted to be a musician, he called it a hobby for children. When I fell in love with Catherine, he called her a distraction. What was she like? Your wife. A sad smile touched Grayson's lips. Beautiful, strong, stubborn. She stood up to my father in ways I never could. She made me brave. And after she died, you stopped playing music? He nodded. Everything that brought joy just hurt too much? Until Elijah hummed, Zariah said gently. Until you made him hum, Grayson corrected, looking directly at her. Why did you come here, Zariah? A woman with your talents could be doing more than cleaning houses. Zariah looked down at her hands. I needed to start over. Atlanta had too many memories, too many mistakes. Mistakes. I spent years taking care of everyone else. My mother was sick for a long time. Then I got engaged to a man who turned out to be seeing someone else behind my back. When my grandmother died last year, there was nothing left to stay for. She shrugged, so I ran. Applied to the agency, took the first job that would take me far away, and ended up stuck with another family's problems, Grayson said with a bitter laugh. I don't mind your problems, Zariah said honestly. Elijah is special. And I'm what? He asked when she didn't finish. Their eyes met, and for a moment Zariah forgot all the reasons why this was complicated. He was her employer. His life was a mess. She'd sworn not to fall for emotionally unavailable men again. You're someone who loves his son, she said finally. That matters more than you know. Grayson reached out, his fingers barely touching hers on the piano keys. Thank you for everything you're doing. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with things neither was ready to say. Then footsteps in the hallway broke the spell. They both stood up quickly as Peterson appeared in the doorway. Sir, your father is asking for you, the butler said, his eyes darting between them curiously. Tell him I'll be right there, Grayson said, straightening his shirt. When Peterson left, Grayson turned back to Zariah. We should continue Elijah's sessions tomorrow. After my father goes to his business meetings. Of course, she agreed, suddenly very aware of how inappropriate this late-night conversation might seem. As she turned to leave, Grayson called after her softly. Zariah, yes? Be careful around my father. He doesn't like a change. The next day, Reginald Cole was everywhere in the house, inspecting rooms, questioning staff, making notes in a small black book. When he finally left for meetings in the city, the entire household seemed to exhale. Zariah met Elijah in the music room as planned. The boy seemed more withdrawn than before, clinging to Mrs. Winter's hand until he saw the piano. He's been agitated since his grandfather arrived, Mrs. Winters explained. Barely slept last night. It's okay, Zariah assured Elijah, sitting at the piano. We can just listen today if you want. But to her surprise, once Mrs. Winters left, Elijah climbed onto the bench beside her and pressed a key, the G note she'd taught him. Then another and another, forming a clumsy but recognizable pattern. You've been practicing, Zariah said, delighted. That's wonderful, Elijah. She played alongside him, turning his halting notes into a melody. Gradually his small hums joined in. Neither noticed Grayson in the doorway, watching with undisguised hope on his face. When he finally stepped in, guitar in hand, Elijah actually looked up and made eye contact with his father, something so rare that Grayson froze mid-step. Keep playing, Zariah encouraged. He's waiting for you. The three of them made music together for nearly an hour, Elijah growing bolder with each song. When Grayson played an old lullaby, something extraordinary happened. Elijah leaned against his father's side, eyes closed, humming along. Zariah saw tears sliding down Grayson's cheeks as he continued playing. His son nestled against him for the first time in years. When the session ended, Elijah did something else new. He took a crayon from his pocket and a small notebook, drawing 3 stick figures with musical notes around them. He handed it solemnly to Zariah. Is this us? She asked, touched. You, me, and your dad making music? Elijah nodded, the tiniest movement of his head. Grayson stared in shock. He never draws people. Never. After Elijah left with Mrs. Winters for his afternoon routine, Grayson turned to Zariah, his face transformed with hope. This is more than I dared to wish for. He's connecting again. Children find their way back when they feel safe, Zariah said. I have given him that safety. We've given him that, Grayson corrected, taking her hands impulsively. I have given us both something I thought was lost forever. The touch of his hands on hers sent warmth through Zariah's body. For a moment they stood close, the air between them charged with possibility. Then the spell broke as Peterson cleared his throat from the doorway. Sir, your father has returned early. He's asking for Master Elijah. Dinner that night was tense. Zariah, serving in the dining room at Peterson's request, tried to be invisible, as Reginald questioned Grayson about business matters. Elijah sat silently, pushing food around his plate without eating. The boy looks thin, Reginald commented sharply. What are you feeding him? He eats when he's comfortable, Grayson replied, his patience clearly strained. He needs discipline, Reginald insisted. Structure. The Swiss school has an excellent nutrition program. We've discussed this, Father. Elijah stays with me. Reginald's cold eyes swept the room, landing briefly on Zariah. You, girl, are you new? Yes, sir, Zariah replied evenly. I'm Zariah Banks. I clean the East Wing. The East Wing only? His eyes narrowed suspiciously. Father, leave the staff alone, Grayson interjected. I like to know who's in my house, Reginald said. You're too trusting, Grayson. Just like you were with Catherine. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Elijah's fork clattered to his plate. Elijah, go with Miss Banks, Grayson said quietly. It's time for your bath. The boy stays, Reginald countered. He needs to learn to sit through a proper meal. Miss Banks? Take Elijah upstairs, Grayson repeated, his voice brooking no argument. Grateful for the escape, Zariah guided Elijah from the room just as Reginald's voice rose behind them. You're making the same mistakes all over again. Upstairs, Zariah helped Elijah with his nighttime routine as Mrs. Winters had shown her. The boy seemed agitated, his hands flapping anxiously. It's okay, she soothed. Would you like me to sing while you get ready for bed? She sang softly as he brushed his teeth and changed into pajamas, watching as his rigid shoulders gradually relaxed. When she tucked him into bed, he pulled out his notebook and crayons again. This time he drew something that made Zariah's breath catch, a blue shape at the bottom of the page. It looked like water, with a stick figure floating in it. Elijah, what is this? She asked gently. The boy's eyes filled with tears and he turned away, curling into a tight ball. I'm sorry, Zariah said quickly. You don't have to tell me, but I'm here if you want to. She sat beside his bed, singing lullabies until his breathing deepened into sleep. Then she carefully took the drawing from his limp hand, studying it with growing unease. If the blue was water, was this a drawing of the pool accident? As she left Elijah's room, she nearly collided with Grayson in the hallway. His face was tight with anger. Is he asleep? He asked. Yes, Zariah hesitated, then showed him the drawing. Grayson, he drew this tonight. Grayson's face drained of color as he stared at the crude image. Where did this come from? He just started drawing after I mentioned his bath, Zariah explained. It upset him. Grayson took the paper, his hand trembling slightly. Did anyone else see this? No, just me. Zariah stepped closer. Grayson, what happened to your wife, really? His eyes met hers, filled with pain and something that looked like fear. She drowned in the pool. Elijah was there. He saw it happen. Was it really an accident? Grayson looked away. That's what the police report says. But you don't believe it, Zariah guessed. What I believe doesn't matter. He folded the drawing and put it in his pocket. My father arrives and suddenly Elijah is drawing this? It can't be a coincidence. What are you saying? Grayson glanced down the hall nervously. Not here. My father has ears everywhere. He led her to the library and closed the door firmly behind them. For a long moment he stood with his back to her, shoulders tense. Catherine and my father hated each other, he finally said. She thought he was controlling, and he thought she was taking me away from the family business. The night she died they had a terrible argument. About what? About Elijah. Catherine believed he was showing signs of autism and wanted him evaluated. My father refused to consider it, said she was making up problems to get attention. Zariah sat down slowly, processing this. And after the argument, Catherine was upset. She went for a night swim to calm down, something she did often. My father was the one who found her body floating in the pool. Grayson's voice broke. Elijah was sitting at the edge, soaking wet and screaming. It was the last sound he made for 3 years. Oh God, Zariah whispered. You think your father... I don't know what to think, Grayson cut her off. The police ruled it an accident. They said she hit her head on the pool edge and drowned. But Catherine was an excellent swimmer. And Elijah saw everything. Yes, Grayson finally turned to face her, his eyes haunted. After that night, he shut down completely. And my father took control of everything. The house, the business, even Elijah's care. He hired the specialists, fired the ones he didn't like. He's been pushing for that Swiss school for years. To get Elijah away from here, Zariah realized. Away from whatever he might remember. Grayson nodded grimly. If Elijah ever starts talking again, he might tell someone what really happened that night, Zariah finished. The weight of this revelation hung between them. Zariah thought of Reginald's cold eyes, his controlling manner, his hatred for his daughter-in-law. Could he have actually killed her? Why are you telling me this? She asked. You barely know me. Grayson moved closer, taking her hands. Because for the first time in 3 years I see hope. Elijah is responding to you. He's making sounds, drawing pictures. He's trying to communicate. And you think he might eventually tell us what he saw? I think he deserves the chance to heal, Grayson said. And I think you're the key to that healing. Their eyes locked. And Zariah felt something shift between them. A connection that went beyond employer and employee. Beyond even friends. I want to help, she said softly. But your father... Leave my father to me, Grayson said with new determination. What matters now is Elijah. As they stood there, hands still joined, the library door burst open. Reginald Cole stood in the doorway, his cold eyes taking in their clasped hands, their close proximity. So this is how you spend your evenings, he said, his voice like ice. Conspiring with the help. Grayson dropped Zariah's hands but didn't step away from her. We were discussing Elijah's care. Were you indeed? Reginald's gaze fixed on Zariah with open hostility. Miss Banks, you're fired. Pack your things and be gone by morning. Father, Grayson protested. She stays in my house on my payroll, Reginald snapped. And I say she goes. Then I'll hire her myself, Grayson said firmly. As Elijah's music therapist, Reginald laughed without humor. Music therapist? Is that what you're calling it? Elijah is responding to music, Grayson insisted. For the first time in 3 years, he's connecting. Nonsense, Reginald dismissed. The boy is damaged beyond repair. You just can't accept it. Show him, Zariah said quietly to Grayson. Show him what Elijah can do. Grayson hesitated, then nodded. Father, come with us. There's something you need to see. The three of them stood in Elijah's room watching the sleeping child. Grayson gently woke his son. Elijah, can you show Grandfather what we've been doing? The music? The boy blinked sleepily, looking fearfully at Reginald. It's okay, Zariah encouraged. Remember how we played today? Elijah slipped out of bed and padded across to the small keyboard in the corner of his room. His hands hovered over the keys uncertainly. Go ahead, Grayson said gently. Show Grandfather. With trembling fingers, Elijah pressed the keys in the pattern Zariah had taught him. The simple melody filled the room. Then, to everyone's shock, he began to hum along softly but clearly. Reginald's face went slack with surprise.
How?
When did this start? A week ago, Grayson said, unable to hide his pride. Thanks to Zariah. Elijah finished his song and looked up at his grandfather, his eyes wary but determined. For a moment, Reginald seemed genuinely moved. Then his expression hardened again. A few notes and humming. That's hardly speaking. It's progress, Grayson argued. More than any specialist has achieved. 1 week of parlor tricks doesn't change anything, Reginald said dismissively. The Swiss school will never happen, Grayson interrupted, his voice steely. My son stays with me, and Miss Banks stays as his music therapist. If you don't like it, you can return to Europe. Father and son stared at each other, years of tension crackling between them. Finally, Reginald turned away. You'll regret this defiance, he said coldly. Both of you. He looked pointedly at Zariah before stalking out. After tucking Elijah back into bed, Grayson and Zariah stepped into the hallway. That was brave, Zariah said. It felt good, Grayson admitted, standing up to him after all these years. He won't give up easily. I know. Grayson ran a hand through his hair. But neither will we. The word hung between them. We. A team. A unit. Something neither had expected to find. Be careful, Zariah, Grayson warned. My father is dangerous when crossed. I'm not afraid of him, she replied. You should be. Grayson's voice was grave. If he had anything to do with Catherine's death, Then we need to find out the truth, Zariah finished. For Elijah's sake. And yours. Their eyes met in silent understanding. Whatever was growing between them personally would have to wait. First, they needed to uncover what really happened the night Catherine died, before Reginald could silence them all. The next morning, Zariah woke to find a note slipped under her door. Meet me in the old boathouse at noon. I have information about Catherine Cole's death. Come alone. The handwriting was shaky, unfamiliar. Zariah stared at it, her heart racing. Who in the house would know something? And why contact her instead of Grayson? She debated showing him the note, but decided against it. If this was a genuine lead, she wanted proof before getting his hopes up. At noon, she made her way across the vast estate grounds to the small boathouse by the lake. The wooden structure looked abandoned, its paint peeling, windows grimy with dust. "Hello?" she called, pushing open the creaking door. The interior was dim and musty. Old boats hung from the ceiling, and fishing gear collected dust on shelves. No one seemed to be there. "Is anyone here?" Zariah tried again, stepping further inside. The door slammed shut behind her with a bang that made her jump. She whirled around to find Reginald Cole blocking the exit. "Mr. Cole," she gasped. "Did you leave that note?" "Such a predictable response," he said with contempt. "You people always think you're so clever." "You people?" Zariah repeated, backing away slowly. "Gold diggers, opportunists." His smile was cold. "First Catherine, now you. Women who see a wealthy, weak man and think they can worm their way into his life. I'm just trying to help Elijah," Zariah insisted. "By seducing his father? By turning my grandson against me." Reginald moved closer. "I've worked too hard to build this family, this legacy. I won't let another scheming woman destroy it. Is that what you thought Catherine was doing? Destroying your legacy?" Reginald's eyes narrowed. Catherine was going to take Grayson and the boy away. She'd already consulted divorce attorneys. She was going to expose family business that wasn't hers to share. "So you stopped her," Zariah said, her suspicion finally confirmed. "I protected what was mine," he replied without remorse. "Just as I'm going to protect it now." Zariah glanced around desperately for an escape route or weapon. "Grayson knows I'm here. He'll come looking." "Grayson thinks you've gone shopping with Mrs. Winters," Reginald said smugly. "By the time he realizes you're missing, you'll be long gone. Just another servant who quit without notice." "You won't get away with this," Zariah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Elijah is remembering. He's drawing pictures of the pool of his mother." Something flickered across Reginald's face, the first sign of uncertainty. The boy saw nothing. He saw everything, Zariah countered. "And soon he'll find a way to tell us." Reginald moved with surprising speed for a man his age, grabbing Zariah's arm painfully. "You've caused enough trouble in my house." Suddenly, the boathouse door flew open. Grayson stood there, his face a mask of fury. "Let her go, Father, now." Reginald released Zariah's arm but didn't back down. "This woman is poisoning your mind just like Catherine did." "No," Grayson said, stepping between them. "You're the poison. You always have been." "How dare you speak to me that way?" Reginald hissed. "After everything I've done for you, for this family, what did you do to Catherine?" Grayson demanded. "Tell me the truth now." "I saved our family from scandal," Reginald said defiantly. "She was going to take you and the boy away. She was going to ruin us." Zariah watched as understanding dawned on Grayson's face, the confirmation of his worst fears. "You killed her," he whispered. "My God, you actually killed her." "She was in the pool," Reginald said, his voice eerily calm. "All I did was hold her under until she stopped fighting. Elijah was supposed to be asleep. I didn't know he was watching until I heard him screaming." Grayson staggered back as if physically struck. "How could you? She was my wife, Elijah's mother." "She was an obstacle," Reginald replied. "Just like this one." He nodded toward Zariah. "You're going to prison," Grayson said, pulling out his cell phone. "I'm calling the police." "Don't be foolish," Reginald scoffed. "It's been 3 years. There's no evidence. It's your word against mine. And who do you think they'll believe? The respected businessman, or the unstable son who couldn't handle his wife's accidental death? They'll believe Elijah," Zariah said quietly, "when he starts talking again." "The boy will never speak," Reginald said with terrible confidence. "The trauma is too deep. That's why I've allowed your little music games, because I know they're ultimately pointless." "You're wrong," Grayson said. "Zariah has reached him. He's coming back to us." "Then perhaps it's time to revisit the Swiss school option," Reginald said. before he remembers too much. Grayson's face hardened with resolve. Get out of my house, Father, today. I don't care where you go, but if you ever come near my son again, I will make sure everyone knows what you did. You're making a mistake, Reginald warned. You need me. The business needs me. I don't care about the business, Grayson said. I care about my son, and Zariah. He looked at her as he said this, his eyes conveying everything his words couldn't yet. Reginald looked between them, seeing something that made his lip curl in disgust. You're as weak as your mother was. A disappointment to the end. Without another word, he pushed past them and stalked away toward the house. When he was gone, Grayson turned to Zariah. Are you all right? Did he hurt you? I'm fine, she assured him. How did you know to find me here? Mrs. Winters saw you heading this way. She thought it was strange since you were supposed to be working inside today. He shook his head. I should have known he would try something. Grayson, Zariah said gently. He admitted to killing your wife. I know. His voice broke. After all these years of suspecting, hearing him say it, Zariah reached for his hand. We have to protect Elijah, and we have to make sure your father can never hurt anyone else. Without proof, it's just my word against his, Grayson said bitterly. He was right about that. Then we need to find proof, Zariah said. Or help Elijah find his voice so he can tell what he saw. Grayson looked at her with wonder. Anyone else would be running away after what just happened. Why are you still here? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither had dared to voice. Because some things are worth fighting for, Zariah said simply. Elijah is worth fighting for, and so are you. Grayson pulled her into his arms then, holding her tight against his chest. For a moment, they stood together, drawing strength from each other. We should get back to the house, Zariah finally said. Make sure Elijah is safe. As they walked back together, Grayson's hand found hers. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Zariah nodded, knowing that the real battle was just beginning. Reginald wouldn't leave quietly. He would fight to protect himself, his reputation, his freedom. But for the first time since coming to the coal estate, Zariah felt something she hadn't expected to find, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and despite all the danger ahead, a sense of hope. Hope for Elijah's voice to return, hope for Grayson's heart to heal, and hope for her own future, no longer running from the past, but standing firm for a family that needed her as much as she needed them. Reginald Cole did not leave the estate as ordered. Instead, he locked himself in his study, making phone calls late into the night. The next morning, he emerged with a cold smile that sent shivers through the household. Is he gone? Zariah asked when she met Grayson in the music room for Elijah's session. No, Grayson replied grimly, and he's up to something. I've already called my attorney, but without proof of what he did to Catherine, but we'll find proof, Zariah assured him. For now, we focus on Elijah. The boy entered the room clutching his drawing pad, his eyes darting around nervously. He seemed to sense the tension in the house. It's okay, Zariah said gently. We're going to play music just like always. For the next hour, they lost themselves in melodies, creating a bubble of safety around Elijah. His humming grew stronger each day, and today he even tapped rhythms on the piano while Grayson played guitar. When the session ended, Elijah surprised them by opening his drawing pad. Inside was a new picture, stick figures standing by blue water, but this time with another figure behind them, larger and menacing. Is this your grandfather? Grayson asked carefully, pointing to the large figure. Elijah nodded, his eyes fearful. And this is the pool? Zariah asked, indicating the blue area. Another nod. And who is this in the water? Grayson's voice trembled as he pointed to a stick figure floating in the blue. Elijah took a crayon and drew long hair on the figure. Then he wrote a shaky letter M beside it. M for Mommy? Zariah suggested softly. Elijah's eyes filled with tears as he nodded again. Grayson pulled his son into a gentle hug. It's okay, buddy. You're so brave for showing us. Elijah, Zariah said when the boy had calmed down. Can you tell us what happened to Mommy? In your own way? The child hesitated, then took his crayons again. He drew the large stick figure with its arms reaching toward the figure in the water. Then he drew wavy lines above the water, like someone struggling. Grayson's face went pale. He saw everything. This is important evidence, Zariah said, but we need more. Reginald was right. After 3 years, his word against yours wouldn't be enough. What about the original police investigation? Grayson wondered. Maybe they missed something. Do you have access to those records? They should be in my father's study, Grayson said thoughtfully. He insisted on handling everything after Catherine died. I was too devastated to argue. Zariah nodded. Then we need to get into that study. That afternoon, Zariah was cleaning the hallway outside Reginald's study when she overheard him on the phone. It's all arranged, he was saying. The Swiss school has agreed to take the boy next week. Emergency admission. Yes, I'm aware my son will object. That's why I've taken steps. Zariah's blood ran cold. She hurried to find Grayson, who was in his office reviewing documents. Your father is planning to send Elijah to Switzerland, she said without preamble. Next week, Grayson's face hardened. He can't do that without my consent. Are you sure? He mentioned taking steps. A look of alarm crossed Grayson's face. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. After a tense conversation, he hung up, looking sick. He's filed for emergency guardianship of Elijah, Grayson explained, claiming I'm mentally unfit to care for a special needs child. He has 3 psychiatrists willing to testify that I never recovered from Catherine's death. Can he do that? With his money and connections? He can try. Grayson slammed his fist on the desk. And we need proof of what he did. Now. Tonight, Zariah decided. When he goes to dinner. He always dines out on Thursdays, right? Yes, at the country club, but his study is locked when he's out. Leave that to me, Zariah said, thinking of the skeleton keys Mrs. Winters kept for cleaning the locked rooms. At 7:30, Reginald's car pulled away from the estate. Zariah waited 15 minutes, then met Grayson outside the study door with Mrs. Winters' keys. Are you sure about this? Grayson asked as she tried different keys in the lock. If my father catches us, we're fighting for Elijah, Zariah reminded him. Whatever happens is worth it. The lock finally clicked open. They slipped inside, closing the door behind them. Reginald's study was immaculate. A massive desk dominated the room, with filing cabinets lining one wall and a bar cart in the corner. Where would he keep police files? Zariah wondered, scanning the room. His safe, probably. Grayson pointed to a painting that clearly concealed a wall safe, but I don't know the combination. They searched the desk first, careful to leave everything exactly as they found it. In the bottom drawer, hidden beneath legal documents, was a small leather-bound journal with Reginald's monogram. His diary, Zariah guessed, handing it to Grayson. He opened it, flipping through pages of neat handwriting. Suddenly he stopped, his face draining of color. What is it? Zariah asked. The night Catherine died, Grayson read aloud. Had to take care of the Catherine problem tonight. She threatened to take Grayson and the boy away, to expose the company's financial irregularities. Caught her alone by the pool. It was easier than expected. She never saw it coming. Unfortunate about the boy witnessing it, but his autism works in our favor. No one will believe him even if he speaks again. Police ruled it accidental drowning as expected. Donations to the police foundation were worthwhile investments. Zariah stared in horror. He wrote it all down. He never thought anyone would see this, Grayson said, his voice shaking. My God, he murdered her, and then used his influence to cover it up. A noise in the hallway made them both freeze. Footsteps approached the study door. Hide, Grayson whispered, stuffing the diary into his jacket pocket. They barely had time to duck behind the heavy curtains before the door opened. Through a small gap, Zariah saw Reginald enter with another man, someone in a doctor's coat. Everything is prepared, the doctor was saying. Once you have guardianship, we can administer the medications as discussed. The boy will be docile for the trip to Switzerland. Excellent, Reginald replied. The hearing is tomorrow morning. Judge Wilson owes me several favors. By tomorrow afternoon, my son will be removed from the equation, and the boy will be on a plane. What about the woman? The new maid? She'll be dealt with, Reginald said dismissively. A background check revealed some interesting information we can use against her. Zariah felt Grayson tense beside her. The men moved to the desk, reviewing papers. After what seemed like an eternity, they left, locking the door behind them. We have to get out of here, Grayson whispered. He tried the door. Locked from the outside. Zariah pointed to the window. That's our only option. They crossed the room carefully and opened the window. Thankfully, they were on the ground floor. They climbed out, quietly closing it behind them, and hurried around to the back entrance of the house. Once safely in Grayson's private study, he pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Detective Morgan. He's an old friend who never believed Catherine's death was an accident." As Grayson made the call, Zariah paced nervously. "What did your father mean about a background check on me?" "I don't know," Grayson admitted after hanging up. "But we can't worry about that now. Morgan is coming over first thing tomorrow. With this diary, we can stop my father." "And the guardianship hearing?" "My attorney is filing an emergency stay tonight. But we need to be careful. My father is desperate now, which makes him more dangerous." Zariah nodded, then hesitated. "Grayson, there is something in my background your father might use against me." He looked at her questioningly. "In Atlanta, I was briefly arrested during a protest against housing discrimination. The charges were dropped, but it's on my record. I didn't mention it when I applied for this job." To her surprise, Grayson smiled. "Standing up for what's right is nothing to be ashamed of." "There's more," she admitted. "The man I was engaged to, he was married. I didn't know until his wife showed up at my apartment. It caused a big scene, and she tried to press charges for harassment when I confronted him at his office. Those charges were dropped too, but my father could twist it to make you look unstable," Grayson finished. "Don't worry. By tomorrow, he'll be the one facing charges." Zariah slept poorly that night, jumping at every sound. At dawn, she went to check on Elijah and found his room empty. Panicking, she ran to Grayson's room and pounded on the door. "Elijah's gone," she cried when he opened it. They searched the entire west wing, then the east. Finally, they found Peterson standing guard outside the door to Reginald's wing. "Where is my son?" Grayson demanded. "Mr. Reginald took the boy for an early breakfast in town," Peterson replied stiffly. "He said you authorized it." "That's a lie," Grayson snapped. "Call the police now." But before Peterson could move, Reginald's voice came from behind them. "That won't be necessary." They turned to find Reginald standing there, holding Elijah's hand. The boy looked frightened but unharmed. "Just getting to know my grandson," Reginald said with a cold smile. "Is that a crime?" "It is when you've kidnapped him," Grayson said, pulling Elijah to his side. "It's over, Father. The police are on their way." "To arrest you, perhaps," Reginald countered smoothly, "for breaking into my private study." The security cameras caught everything. Zariah felt her heart sink. They'd been so careful but hadn't considered cameras. "They'll be more interested in your diary," Grayson said, pulling the leather book from his pocket, "where you confessed to murdering my wife." For the first time, Reginald looked shaken. "You're lying." "Had to take care of the Catherine problem tonight," Grayson quoted. "Your exact words, Father." The sound of car doors slamming outside broke the standoff. Detective Morgan had arrived with 2 uniformed officers. "You'll regret this," Reginald hissed. He looked at Zariah with venom. "And you. I warned my son about women like you. Gold diggers, manipulators." "I think you're confusing me with yourself," Zariah replied calmly. "I'm not the manipulator in this house." Reginald lunged for the diary, but Grayson pulled back. In the ensuing struggle, Elijah did something no one expected. He spoke, "No." The single word, raspy from disuse but clear, froze everyone in place. "Elijah," Grayson whispered in shock. The boy pointed a trembling finger at his grandfather. "Bad man! Hurt Mommy!" Tears streamed down Grayson's face as he knelt beside his son. "That's right, buddy. And he's not going to hurt anyone ever again." Reginald's face twisted with rage. The boy is confused, traumatized. He doesn't know what he's saying. "I think he knows exactly what he's saying," Detective Morgan said from the doorway. "And I'd like to hear more." The next few hours passed in a blur. Reginald was taken to the police station for questioning. Detective Morgan interviewed Elijah gently, with Grayson and a child psychologist present. Though the boy spoke only a few words, they were devastatingly clear. "Push, Mommy, water, hold down." Combined with the diary and the drawings, it was enough for the detective to hold Reginald while they reopened the investigation. That evening, when the house was finally quiet, Zariah found Grayson in the music room. Sitting at the piano but not playing. "How is he?" she asked softly. "Sleeping," Grayson replied. "The psychologist said it might be good for him to talk about it in small doses, that the music helped unlock something. You should be proud of him. He's so brave." "I'm proud of both of us," Grayson said, looking up at her, "for not giving up." Zariah sat beside him on the piano bench. "What happens now?" "My father will likely go to prison. The diary alone is damning evidence." Grayson shook his head. "I keep thinking about Catherine." How I failed to protect her. You couldn't have known, Zariah said gently. Your father fooled everyone. Not Elijah, Grayson said. He knew. He carried that knowledge inside him for 3 years. Children see the truth, Zariah agreed, even when they can't express it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Grayson's hand found hers on the piano keys. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come here, he said softly. Elijah might never have spoken again. I might never have learned the truth. You would have found your way, Zariah assured him. No, he insisted. You changed everything, Zariah. For both of us. Their eyes met, and this time there was no interruption, no crisis to pull them apart. Grayson leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. Instead, Zariah closed the distance between them. Their lips met in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened, years of loneliness and pain melting away in the warmth of newfound connection. When they finally broke apart, Grayson rested his forehead against hers. I know it's fast. I know we're still in the middle of all this chaos. But I'm falling in love with you, Zariah Banks. I promised myself I wouldn't fall for unavailable men anymore, Zariah admitted with a soft laugh. Or try to save people who didn't want saving. Am I unavailable? Grayson asked. Not anymore, she whispered. And I think we're saving each other. He kissed her again, and for a moment, the mansion felt like a home instead of a prison of secrets. The next morning, they were having breakfast with Elijah when Peterson appeared. Sir, there's a reporter at the gate. Several, actually. The butler looked uncomfortable. News of Mr. Reginald's arrest has leaked. Grayson sighed. It was bound to happen. Tell them no comment. There's more, Peterson added hesitantly. Mr. Reginald's attorney called. He's been released on bail. Zariah and Grayson exchanged alarmed looks. How is that possible? Zariah asked. He confessed in his own diary. Money and influence, Grayson said grimly. My father has judges and politicians in his pocket. But he won't get away with this. The evidence is too strong. He'll try something, Zariah worried. He's desperate now. I've hired security, Grayson assured her. They're already patrolling the grounds. We're safe. But even as he said it, Zariah couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. A man like Reginald wouldn't simply accept defeat. He would strike back. 3 days later, Zariah was helping Elijah with a drawing when Mrs. Winters hurried into the room, looking distressed. Miss Banks, there's a woman here to see you. Says her name is Tanya Williams. Zariah froze. Tanya was the wife of her ex-fiancé, the woman who had exposed his lies. What is she doing here? Zariah wondered aloud. She says Mr. Reginald Cole invited her, Mrs. Winters replied nervously. She's waiting in the library with Mr. Grayson. Zariah hurried to the library, her mind racing. When she entered, she found Grayson looking confused and a stylishly dressed woman sitting across from him. Zariah, Tanya said, standing. It's been a while. Tanya, Zariah replied cautiously. What are you doing here? Your employer's father contacted me, Tanya explained. Said you were causing problems for his family. Asked me to tell them about our history. And you came all the way from Atlanta for that? Zariah asked incredulously. Tanya had the grace to look embarrassed. He offered to pay my debts if I did. Of course he did, Grayson said bitterly. My father thinks he can buy anything, including people's integrity. I didn't know what was really happening, Tanya admitted. When I got here and heard the rumors about him being arrested for murder, I realized he was using me. To discredit Zariah, Grayson finished. To make her look like a troublemaker, who goes from one wealthy family to another causing problems. Tanya nodded. That's what he implied. But now I see he's the problem, not Zariah. She turned to Zariah with genuine remorse. I'm sorry. For coming here and for how I treated you back then. You didn't know Michael was married any more than I knew he was engaged to you. It's in the past, Zariah said, surprised by how little it hurt now. We were both victims of the same liar. Well, I won't be part of another manipulation, Tanya declared. In fact, I'll tell the police about how Reginald tried to bribe me if it helps your case. After Tanya left, Grayson pulled Zariah close. Are you okay? Yes, she said honestly. It actually feels good to close that chapter completely. My father is getting desperate, Grayson observed. Bringing someone from your past to try to shame you. It won't work, Zariah said confidently. We have the truth on our side. And each other, Grayson added, kissing her forehead. That evening, a storm rolled in over the estate, lightning illuminating the grounds in brief, ghostly flashes. Zariah had just finished tucking Elijah into bed when the mansion's power flickered and died. Just the storm, she assured the frightened boy. The lights will come back soon. She lit the battery-powered lantern on his nightstand and sang softly until he fell asleep. As she closed his door, she nearly collided with Grayson in the dark hallway. "Generator should kick in soon," he said, holding a flashlight. "I was coming to check on you two." Together they made their way toward the stairs, the beam of Grayson's flashlight cutting through the darkness. As they passed the library, a floorboard creaked behind them. Grayson whirled around, pointing the flashlight down the empty hall. "Hello, Peterson?" No answer, just the howling of the wind outside. "Probably just the old house settling," Zariah suggested, though unease prickled along her spine. They continued toward the stairs, but as they reached the landing, the flashlight caught a reflection, a pair of eyes in the darkness below. "Who's there?" Grayson called sharply. Reginald Cole stepped into the beam of light, his face eerily calm. "Hello, son. I thought we should talk." "You're not supposed to be here," Grayson said, pushing Zariah slightly behind him. "The court ordered you to stay away." "Courts," Reginald scoffed. "Laws. These things are for ordinary people, not for men like me." "Get out before I call the police," Grayson warned. "The phones are down," Reginald replied. "The security team has been diverted. It's just us. A family meeting, long overdue." Zariah noticed something glinting in Reginald's hand. "A gun. What are you going to do?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Shoot us both. Add 2 more murders to your record." "If necessary," Reginald said coldly. "But I'd prefer a simpler solution. Grayson will sign papers transferring guardianship of Elijah to me. I'll take the boy to Switzerland tonight. You, Miss Banks, will leave and never contact them again." "That will never happen," Grayson stated firmly. "Then there will be another tragic accident in this house," Reginald said, raising the gun. "Perhaps a murder-suicide? A father, distraught over false accusations, kills his son's caretaker, then himself." Zariah's mind raced. Elijah was sleeping just down the hall. "If shots were fired, you won't get away with this," she said. "People know the truth now." "People believe what powerful men tell them to believe," Reginald replied. "Now shall we go to my study to sign those papers, or shall we end this messily?" A small sound made them all turn. Elijah stood in the hallway behind them, his eyes wide with fear. "Go back to your room, Elijah," Grayson said urgently, but the boy didn't move. Instead, he stared at his grandfather, recognition and terror in his eyes. "Bad man," he said clearly. "Hurt Mommy." Reginald's face twisted with rage. "Shut up, boy. You saw nothing." "Hurt Mommy in water," Elijah continued, his voice growing stronger. "Hold Mommy down." "I said shut up," Reginald shouted, swinging the gun toward Elijah. Everything happened at once. Zariah lunged toward Elijah as Grayson threw himself at his father. The gun went off with a deafening bang, the flash momentarily lighting the dark hallway. Zariah covered Elijah with her body, waiting for pain that didn't come. When she looked up, Grayson and Reginald were struggling on the landing, the gun between them. "Run," Grayson shouted to her. "Take Elijah and run." She scooped up the boy and dashed for the stairs, hearing the 2 men still fighting behind her. As she reached the bottom step, a second shot rang out, then silence. Clutching Elijah tightly, Zariah turned back, her heart in her throat. In the dim emergency lights that had finally flickered on, she saw a figure staggering down the stairs. "Grayson?" she called fearfully. "It's me," he answered, his voice ragged. "He's down. I think he shot himself during the struggle." Sirens wailed in the distance. Somehow someone had called for help. As blue and red lights illuminated the driveway, Zariah set Elijah down and ran to Grayson, checking him for injuries. "You're bleeding," she gasped, seeing the tear in his shirt sleeve. "Just a graze," he assured her, pulling both her and Elijah into his arms. "We're okay." "We're all okay now." As police and paramedics swarmed the mansion, the 3 of them huddled together on the bottom step. A family forged in music and truth, finally free from the shadow that had haunted them. But even as relief washed over her, Zariah knew their journey wasn't over. Elijah had found his voice, but healing had only just begun, and their newfound love would be tested in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The biggest test of all was still to come, in the form of a charity gala, a public revelation, and a song that would finally break the last chains binding them to the past. The weeks following Reginald's arrest passed in a blur of police interviews. Attorney meetings and reporters camped outside the gates. Reginald had survived his self-inflicted gunshot wound and now faced murder charges, his empire crumbling as investigations into his business practices uncovered decades of corruption. For Elijah, each day brought new progress. Words came slowly at first, single syllables, halting phrases, but they came. The trauma specialists who now visited the estate were amazed by his improvement. Music was the key, Dr. Patel explained during one session. It created a safe pathway for expression when words were too frightening. Will he ever fully describe what happened that night? Grayson asked, watching his son drawing at a small table nearby. Children process trauma differently than adults, the doctor replied. He may share more details over time, or he may express it through art and music. The important thing is that he's communicating again. Zariah had stayed at the estate throughout the turmoil, her position evolving from maid to Elijah's official music therapist. But privately, she was becoming much more to both Elijah and Grayson. One evening, as they sat together on the mansion's back terrace, watching Elijah play in the garden, Grayson took Zariah's hand. "I've been thinking," he said hesitantly, "about the future." "That's a change," Zariah teased. "You've spent so long trapped in the past." "We all have," he acknowledged. "But it's time to look forward." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The Cole Charity Foundation has its annual gala in 3 weeks. It's the biggest social event of the season. I've heard the staff talking about it." Zariah nodded. "My father always used it to showcase the family's power and influence," Grayson explained. "But this year I want it to represent something different. Hope, healing, new beginnings." "That sounds wonderful," Zariah said, watching him closely. She could tell there was more. "I want you there beside me," Grayson continued. "Not as an employee, but as my partner. And I want Elijah to perform." Zariah's eyes widened. "Perform?" "In front of hundreds of people. A simple song on the piano. To show the world who he really is, not who my father tried to make him." Grayson's eyes were bright with emotion. "To reclaim our family name." "That's a lot to ask of him," Zariah said gently. "He's made amazing progress, but a crowded gala might be overwhelming." "We'll prepare him carefully," Grayson assured her. "And we'll be right there with him. The 3 of us together." The word hung between them, together. It held the promise of something permanent, something Zariah had stopped believing was possible for her. "Together," she repeated softly, letting herself imagine it. "I'd like that." Grayson leaned forward, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they parted, he whispered, "I love you. Zariah Banks, you brought music back into our lives when we needed it most." "I love you too," she replied, the words coming easily despite all her past promises, to guard her heart. "Both of you." In the garden, Elijah looked up from his play and waved at them, a small smile on his face. For a moment, they were just a family enjoying a peaceful evening, the shadows of the past receding a little more each day. Planning for the gala consumed the next 2 weeks. Zariah worked daily with Elijah on a simple song they had composed together, a melody that told his story without words. Each day he grew more confident at the piano, his small fingers finding the keys with increasing precision. "You're getting so good," Zariah encouraged during one practice. "Soon you'll be better than me." Elijah looked up at her with a seriousness beyond his years. "Sing with me." "At the party?" It was one of his longest sentences yet, and it caught Zariah by surprise. "You want me to sing while you play?" He nodded emphatically. "I'd be honored," she said, touching his cheek gently. "We'll practice together, okay?" As the gala approached, the mansion transformed. Florists, caterers, and decorators streamed in and out. Mrs. Winters directed the chaos with newfound authority, her position elevated now that Reginald was gone. "Miss Banks," she called, finding Zariah in the music room, "your dress has arrived." The gown Grayson had insisted on buying her was midnight blue silk, elegant but not flashy. When Zariah tried it on, she hardly recognized herself in the mirror. Gone was the young woman who had arrived with a small suitcase and a heart full of doubt. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had found her voice just as surely as Elijah had found his, 2 days before the gala. Detective Morgan visited with news. "Reginald Cole has agreed to a plea deal," he told Grayson and Zariah in the library. "Second-degree murder with a 30-year sentence. No chance of parole for at least 20. Why a plea?" Grayson asked. The evidence against him was overwhelming. To avoid a trial that would expose even more of his crimes, the detective explained. Our investigation uncovered financial fraud, tax evasion, even blackmail of public officials. He's trying to contain the damage, so it's over, Zariah said, relief washing over her. No trial, no need for Elijah to testify. It's over, Morgan confirmed, though he did have one condition for his plea. What condition? Grayson asked warily. He wants to see Elijah once before he's transferred to federal prison. Absolutely not, Grayson snapped. He terrorized my son enough. I agree, Morgan said. I told his attorneys it was out of the question. But I thought you should know, he asked. After the detective left, Zariah found Grayson standing in Catherine's old garden, now blooming again after years of neglect. What are you thinking? She asked, joining him. About closure, he said quietly. My father will spend the rest of his life in prison. Justice for Catherine, finally. But is it enough? What do you mean? I spent years angry at myself for not protecting her, Grayson explained, for not seeing what my father was capable of. Now I wonder if I'm making the same mistake with Elijah, by not letting him see Reginald. Zariah asked. Grayson nodded. Maybe Elijah needs that closure too, on his terms, not my father's. That's for Elijah to decide, Zariah said gently. If he's ready. You're right, Grayson took her hand. We can ask him, together. To their surprise, when carefully asked, Elijah nodded that he did want to see his grandfather, one last time. The meeting was arranged for the day before the gala, in a secure room at the detention center. Elijah sat between Grayson and Zariah, his small hand clutching hers tightly as Reginald Cole was led in, handcuffed and wearing an orange jumpsuit that stripped away his usual imposing presence. You came, Reginald said, his eyes fixed on Elijah. I didn't think they'd let you. Elijah wanted to come, Grayson replied coldly. This is his choice. Reginald sat heavily in the chair across from them, looking suddenly old and defeated. What do you want from me, boy? An apology? A confession? To everyone's surprise, Elijah spoke clearly. Why did you hurt Mommy? The direct question seemed to catch Reginald off guard. For a moment, the mask of arrogance slipped, revealing something almost human beneath. She was taking you away, he said finally. You and your father, breaking up our family. The Cole legacy. That wasn't your decision to make, Grayson said, his voice tight with controlled anger. No, Reginald admitted, his eyes still on Elijah. It wasn't, and I've lost everything because of it. He leaned forward slightly. I never meant for you to see, boy. That part, at least, I regret. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest thing to remorse they would ever get from Reginald Cole. Elijah stared at his grandfather for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. He pushed it across the table. Reginald opened it to reveal a crayon drawing, but not of the pool or his mother's death. Instead, it showed a small stick figure standing far away from a larger figure behind bars. Is this me? Reginald asked, pointing to the jailed figure. Elijah nodded. And you far away from me? Safe. Reginald's voice held an emotion none of them had heard before. Understanding, perhaps. Maybe even acceptance. He folded the paper carefully and handed it back. Keep it. To remind you that I can never hurt you again. As they stood to leave, Reginald called out, Grayson? His son turned, face expressionless. Catherine would be proud, Reginald said, of the father you've become, of the man you are without me. Grayson didn't reply. But Zariah saw something release in his shoulders, a tension he'd carried for years, finally beginning to ease. Outside in the sunlight, Elijah took both their hands. All done, he said simply. No more bad dreams. Grayson knelt to his son's level. That was very brave, buddy. Are you okay? Elijah nodded. Ready to play music now. At the party, Zariah and Grayson exchanged surprised looks. The boy who had been silent for 3 years had faced his greatest fear, and instead of retreating, he was moving forward. Then let's practice one more time, Zariah suggested, squeezing his hand. Make it perfect for tomorrow. The night of the gala arrived with an energy of anticipation throughout the estate. The mansion gleamed with lights, flowers filled every room, and Connecticut's elite filled the grand ballroom despite, or perhaps because of, the scandal surrounding the Cole family. They've come to gawk, Grayson said grimly as he adjusted his tie, watching the crowd from the upstairs landing. To see the ruins of my father's empire. Then let's show them something unexpected, Zariah replied. In her blue gown, with her hair swept up elegantly, she looked like she belonged in this world of wealth and privilege. But her eyes held the same warmth that had first drawn Elijah to her music. Elijah himself stood between them, solemn in a small suit. Around his neck hung a blue necktie, his mother's favorite color, Grayson had told Zariah. "Ready, buddy?" Grayson asked, kneeling to straighten the tie. Elijah nodded, his eyes clear and determined. Together they descended the grand staircase. Conversations hushed as the crowd noticed them, especially Elijah, whom many had heard about, but few had seen in the years since Catherine's death. Grayson led them to the center of the ballroom, where a microphone had been set up beside the grand piano. He cleared his throat and the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began. "For 3 generations, the Cole Foundation has hosted this gala to celebrate its contributions to the community. Tonight marks a new beginning for that legacy." He paused, his eyes finding Zariah's in the crowd. "Many of you have heard about the recent events in my family. The truth about my wife Catherine's death, my father's actions." Murmurs rippled through the audience. "What you may not know is the story of my son, Elijah." He gestured to the small boy now standing beside Zariah. 3 years ago, Elijah witnessed something no child should ever see. The trauma took his voice. Until recently, he hadn't spoken a word since that night. Sympathetic whispers filled the room. What medicine couldn't heal, music began to mend. Grayson's voice softened. "Thanks to a remarkable woman who came into our lives just when we needed her most." He extended his hand to Zariah, who stepped forward. "Tonight my son would like to share his voice with you, a voice that was silenced by fear but found its way back through love and courage." Elijah walked to the piano with surprising confidence. He climbed onto the bench as Zariah sat beside him. The crowd watched in breathless silence as his small fingers positioned themselves over the keys. Then, magic happened. Elijah began to play, a simple, poignant melody he and Zariah had created together. After the first few measures, Zariah's voice joined in, rich and soulful, singing words they had written about a boy finding light after darkness. When the first verse ended, Elijah did something they hadn't rehearsed. He began to sing too. His voice was small but clear, the words sometimes halting but unmistakable. He sang about a mother who loved him, about water and fear, about a grandfather's anger and a father's sadness. He sang about a woman who brought music back and helped him find his words. There wasn't a dry eye in the ballroom. Grayson watched from the side, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as his son's voice, Catherine's gift, silenced for so long, filled the room with truth and healing. When the song ended, silence held for a heartbeat before the crowd erupted in applause. Elijah looked up at Zariah, a smile of pure joy lighting his face. She hugged him tightly, her own tears falling into his dark hair. Grayson joined them at the piano, gathering them both in his arms as cameras flashed and the applause continued. For a moment, they were oblivious to everything but each other, a family forged through music and truth and love. Later, after Elijah had been taken upstairs by Mrs. Winters for bed, Zariah found Grayson on the terrace, away from the still buzzing crowd. "He was incredible," she said, joining him at the stone railing. "Did you know he was going to sing?" "No," Grayson said, wonder still in his voice. That was all him. "He's finding his way back step by step. He's going to be okay," Zariah said with conviction. "We all are." Grayson turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "When you came here, I was a shell of a man, living in the past, afraid of the future. You changed everything, Zariah. We changed each other," she corrected gently. "I was running away from life when I came here. You and Elijah gave me a reason to stand and fight." "And now?" Grayson asked, his eyes searching hers. "What do you want now?" Zariah smiled. "Not to run anymore. To build something real, something lasting. With you. With Elijah." In that case, Grayson reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This might be soon and we can wait as long as you need, but I want you to know my intentions." He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Zariah Banks, will you stay? Not as our maid, not as Elijah's therapist, but as my wife? As part of our family?" Tears filled Zariah's eyes as she looked at the ring, then at the man offering it. Once she had sworn never to fall for someone with as much baggage as Grayson Cole. Never to try saving someone who didn't want to be saved. But this wasn't about saving anymore. This was about building, growing, healing together. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll stay." As Grayson slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her close for a kiss, the sounds of the gala faded away. In this moment there was only them. Two broken people who had found each other amid tragedy and secrets, who had chosen to face the darkness together and emerge into light. 3 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Zariah sat on the front porch of the Cole estate with Grayson beside her and Elijah between them. The boy was chattering about his new school, a local program for gifted children with special needs, where his music talents were flourishing. "And Ms. Jennifer says I can play in the winter concert," he explained excitedly. "Can we practice tonight?" "Of course," Zariah promised. "After dinner." "Speaking of which," Grayson said, checking his watch, "Mrs. Winters will have it ready soon." But none of them moved to go inside. The late afternoon sunlight bathed the estate in golden warmth, transforming what had once felt like a prison into a true home. Zariah's gaze fell on her engagement ring, still sometimes surprising on her finger. Their wedding was planned for spring, simple, intimate, focused on family rather than display. The mansion itself was changing too. Grayson had reopened the West Wing rooms that Reginald had kept locked. They'd found Catherine's paintings, her books, pieces of her life that had been hidden away. Now these treasures were displayed throughout the house, allowing Elijah to know the mother he'd lost. "What are you thinking about?" Grayson asked, noticing Zariah's thoughtful expression. "How different everything is from when I first came here," she replied. "The silence, the secrets. It all seemed so heavy then. And now?" She smiled, looking at Elijah playing with a small toy piano on the porch steps. Then at Grayson's face, no longer haunted but peaceful. Lines of laughter replacing those of worry. "Now there's music," she said simply. "In everything." Grayson leaned over to kiss her softly. "Thanks to you. Thanks to all of us," she corrected. "We healed each other." Elijah looked up from his toy piano. "Family," he said, the word clear and confident. He pointed to each of them in turn. "Dad, Zariah, me." "That's right," Grayson agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "Family." As the sun began to set behind the trees that had once seemed to wall them in, but now simply embraced them, Elijah began to play his toy piano. Grayson hummed along, and Zariah's rich voice joined in, completing their harmony. The music drifted across the estate, no longer a mansion of secrets and pain, but a home built on truth and love. A place where a boy had found his voice, a man had found his strength, and a woman had found where she truly belonged, not in running away, but in standing still, not in silence, but in song together.